Hey guys, welcome back. So now getting back into the Immortal Hulk. At this point in time, we're now being shown how everything new with the One Below All and the Green Door finally connect with the leader. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so at this point we more or less hop into the journal of the leader, to where when he talks about his first journal entry, at this point he claims it's 15 years ago, which I guess is the timestamp as far as Marvel Legacy, to where in that case it makes sense. But for us as the reader, this is actually Tales to Astonish issue 63, when we had got the original origin of the leader. To where before his incident, he wasn't like a super genius. He worked at a chemical waste plant, and at the time one of the containers broke, creating this huge explosion, and he was covered in radioactive chemicals. But as we start to go through his journal entries, what we find out is that Al Ewing is taking this same instance, and he's showing us that this is when the leader actually first died. And it was from this moment that he went from the man formerly known as Sam Stearns and crossed over through the Green Door. But even with doing this and returning back, he didn't remember what had happened on the other side, let alone the Green Door itself. And this is something that Al Ewing has established early on that is not uncommon. And with doing that, it's really Al Ewing's way of making this work with the pre-existing history, which yet again at this point is 15 years ago, because back in Tales to Astonish issue 63, which came out in 1965, but of course it would be weird if he was like, oh, 55 years ago. But at that time, after the leader's incident, like right after, he still looked normal, much like what we'd seen in the Immortal Hulk. But after it had seemed that he had miraculously survived this incident, everything that he had read from that moment, he would just remember. And with doing so, he would just like binge learn book after book. But it was not long after this that he would later see his physical transformation, which at this point brings us around to journal entry point 22, to where at this time he had turned away from his identity of Samuel Stern and cutting all his ties and connections, to where for the most part he really just expresses is his brother, Phil, who he would describe as the actual genius, who he had known before all this happened. And it's kind of crazy the way that he describes communicating with other people, and not just regular people, but even other people considered to be geniuses, because he had reached such a high level of intellect that for him trying to have these conversations, to him it felt like barking back at a dog, which is nuts. Like, how you that smart? But with him continuing on and collecting knowledge, this then takes us to journal entry number 35, to where he had made his attempt to steal research from Bruce Banner, which then led him to discover the Hulk. And he expresses that it was here when he first realized that someone else was just like him. And it was from then that he was determined to study the Hulk and make him either a tool or an ally. But with seeing this, the leader figured that if he could study the Hulk, not only could he learn more from him, but he could also use him as an ally to just take whatever knowledge he needed by brute force. But this then takes us to journal entry 587, which at this point in time is referencing Tales to Astonish issue 73, which at the time took us into the series The Ultimate Machine. And it was at this point that the leader tried to take all the knowledge of the Watcher, which literally overloaded his brain and killed him. Which for the leader, this was his second death. And back in Tales to Astonish, like, I'm sorry, but it looked funny, because he literally fell face first looking like, bruh. And with that, the way the Hulk was looking at him, like, he's dead. Man, I love some Tales to Astonish. But it's at this point that we see what had happened after, because with dying he had seen the One Below All, but for the longest time, like, these moments between death and life, these were moments that he just could not recall. But in the grand scope between the times he had died and the times he had came back, like while he was alive, of course he would have his former notes, and at that point he could backtrack any previous knowledge. And for the leader, anytime that he came back, he had really just told himself, like, of course I came back because I'm the greatest mind, and you know, I just figured it out. But even for him, like, something that outlandish, it just didn't fit right. And over time he had to know that variable in between. But on top of this, like, through the years, there's been moments where the leader has either lost his intelligence, where it began to fade, or even times where he's done it on purpose, or more so as a physical change of his appearance for it to be something that played into his plans. But even for those times in between, he's admitted, like in his Samuel Stearns form, that he believes that the leader is just too smart to actually be smart about it. And even more so to the sense to where, like, he's too informed or too knowledgeable to actually use that knowledge and do something that's actually brilliant. And when he says this, it really reminds me of that Einstein quote, to where, like, imagination is more important than knowledge. Because for the leader, who's definitely in your top 10 smartest people in the Marvel universe, but one of the things that has often restricted him and has caused him to fail time and time again, it's not necessarily him not having the know-how, but rather it's him not applying this knowledge in a new imaginative way. And so at this point, this now takes us to volume 2 of his journal entries, to where Volume 2, Entry Number 1, it's here where the leader's intelligence is restored, which at this point in time now references Your Incredible Hulk issue 343, because after being restored, his brain was like crazy huge, or bigger than it was before. But it was around this time that he had brought in Rock and Redeemer to steal a gamma bomb from the US government so that he could use it on Middletown, Arizona. And at the time, initially this was something that the Hulk was able to stop, but later on it was then manually set off by the leader. But though at the time the leader did do this in hopes of destroying the Hulk, but also with doing this he had the intentions of creating new specimens, because with this area which he had contained, which had like 5,000 people, but with creating this gamma explosion here, he knew that out of that 5,000 he would get at least 2 specimens. And back at the time when he manually set off the blast, there was like a total of 5 survivors, of which 2 of them caught his attention, because one was an encyclopedia salesman who had ended up becoming highly intelligent like the leader, but then the other, Father Jason McCall, he had the ability to bring souls back from the afterlife, which for the leader this blew his mind completely. But when this happened, this moment was short-lived because both him and the leader were destroyed by the Hulk. And after that, the leader he did return through the encyclopedia salesman, but it's here going into volume 3 of his journal where we start to get more of his memories of his encounter, or at least one of his encounters with the One Below All. But after coming back through the body of the encyclopedia salesman, Bert, the leader used him to construct a new body which could travel to the afterlife, but in this case remember the things the leader had seen. But even after doing so, he had described the things that he had seen as things that it would be likely that only Banner would understand. But looking back at this, he remembers being terrified, which was a feeling that he usually didn't have as the leader, which was a bit of ignorance as bliss with originally not remembering these moments. But in one of these instances, he was chased by the One Below All, to where in sheer terror he ran and he called out for Bruce, who had actually heard him in this moment through the green door. But for whatever reason, when Bruce responded, he was like, hey, this ain't a good time. But the leader's like, man, don't hang up, I'm butt naked in hell. But also for the leader, this was a defining moment for him, because with Banner rejecting him, this fueled his hate for Banner even more, which prior to this point, his hatred for Banner was even more fervent after the Hulk had killed the leader sending him here, before the leader can learn the secrets of the Soul Man, Father Jason McCall. But it's here where the leader decided that he could figure this out himself, and when he stopped running and he turned around, the One Below All told him once again that you are my child, you bear my mark. And it was in that moment where the leader was like, okay, like I can work with this. And so now from here we then go into that time period to where General Ross had become the Red Hulk, which of course was the handiwork of the leader and MODOK. But this also takes us into volume 3 of the leader's journal, because along with the leader's different collaborations with MODOK, he discovered that gamma radiation and cosmic radiation had their tertiary attributes. And even when General Ross had drained the leader of his power, even back in his Samuel Stern form, the leader continued his studies, and even with doing so admitting that his Samuel Stern version of himself is getting smarter. But even from here through his next few entries in volume 3 of his journal, he mentions that he's collected information from his time with the Thunderbolts, or even after that when he merged his intellect with an artificial intelligence which he had taken from Banner. But on top of that, he also mentions that he can't help but wonder, like in the case of She-Hulk who was killed by Thanos, like how much is she aware of the One Below All? Because in her case it's quite possible that she also has similar memories of meeting him, much like the leader and much like Banner. And after this, it then takes us to the leader, who goes into the 4th volume of his journal, and with doing so in a way making it clear that this is taking place after Hulkverines, and mainly doing so with mentioning that he had to break up with Dr. Alba, mainly because of the research that he was catching on to, it was just way more important. But also with doing this, we see the creature which he had taken from the broken future, of which he had brought back from the next cosmos, where Hulk was pretty much God. But at this point, he more or less mentions that this broken future is more like a clean canvas of which he can use and create his own reality. And with him mentioning this, we also realize that the leader has figured out how to walk through the green door anytime that he wishes, which is pretty crazy because it almost makes it seem like the green door is giving him access not only to the One Below All and a way back from death, but almost as if it's a way to travel through the different iterations of the cosmos, which is likely something he had put together after learning the relation between gamma radiation and its tertiary similarities to cosmic radiation. But after this, we then jump to a couple months back where we see Brian Banner, who likely at this time has been left in the place below all by Bruce just before Bruce's most recent return. And much like before, Brian Banner's been trying to come back, but with doing so he keeps failing. But even with his failed attempts, he's then met by the leader, who tells Brian Banner that he knows that he's been failing. And in fact, while Brian has been failing, the leader's been taking notes. But it's here where the leader comes to get Brian Banner out of the place below all, but with doing so offering Brian Banner a way out, because at this point the leader has accumulated enough information on how to become a god, which is insane. And so now real quick, I just want to give a shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here and you want information on how to support the channel, I got a link down below to where you can head over to patreon.com/DopeSpill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, because the leader, he is reaching for the stars. And like, just as my guess, like, I don't think the one below all is gonna be too happy about that. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.